Chapter 61. After helping build a base for the humans, I apparently overdid it and ended up getting glared at by Nikolaus, so I hurriedly fled back home. Though trembling with fear inside, I returned home to find Noel anxiously looking around in front of the house. When he noticed me, he rushed over. Witch-sama. There was this really strange presence earlier. Are you all right? Yes, I'm fine. I just reinforced and rearranged the plant walls a little. Since the thorn walls I created had expanded their range and shifted position, even villagers who were already awake at that early hour may have been startled. Like Noel, Leonhardt, who had likely been nearby watching, would probably explain things. Unlike Nikolaus, he has a favorable and cooperative attitude toward me, so he wouldn't make things worse. Probably. The plants were rustling, so I thought monsters were attacking. Oh, it was you, Witch-sama. That's a relief. I'll go prepare breakfast. Noel would likely prepare soup or drinks for me. Using magic had made me hungry, so I was looking forward to it. But before that, I decided to replenish a little and went around to the back of the house. Dipping my feet into the river, I absorbed the nutrients from the purification flowers seeping into the water. If the river became too nutrient-rich, the aquatic plants might overgrow and make it uninhabitable for fish. So I had replaced the river's vegetation with species I created using diversification. That way they wouldn't overpropagate, and simply bathing in the water provided me with considerable nourishment. It should be fine to gradually expand the range downstream along the river, right? It wouldn't be good for the aquatic plants to grow too much. If it continued downstream, eventually my aquatic plants might reach the sea. Once it became seawater, seaweeds would grow, plants of kinds I had never incorporated before, and ones I might not be able to fully control. I would like to visit the sea at least once. Seaweed is different from terrestrial plants, so I wasn't sure whether it fell within the range I could manipulate, but there must be plants that exist only along the coast. If I incorporated plants from all over the world, I would have more options in an emergency. Fighting was scary, but I wanted to incorporate as many plant-type monsters as possible. I can have them fight in my place. I placed various ones at the base this time too. If I let my familiars hunt monsters, I can replenish nutrients without fighting myself, and it won't be scary. Isn't that nothing but benefits? Monsters like Mandragoras that attacked indiscriminately couldn't be used for combat, but if they could attack only monsters, then there should be no issue with them existing within human living areas. Plant monsters that defeated enemies attacking humans and turned them into nutrients would be human allies. One could even call it symbiosis. If humans gradually stop fearing plant monsters that way, then even if my true identity is exposed someday, they might overlook it. Still, that was just insurance. Above all, it was best that my identity never be discovered. It was more convenient to continue being regarded as the flower witch, the same kind as humans. While I was thinking that, I sensed a sprout approaching for some reason and lifted my face. Soon the green sprout appeared, holding something with both hands above its head as it came toward me. The green sprout was supposed to be keeping watch on Nikolaus-san. Did something happen? The greatest risk of my true identity being exposed was Nikolaus, the sole surviving demon. That was precisely why I always wanted eyes on him, and since he seemed to tolerate sprouts staying by his side, I had assigned the green sprout as his dedicated watcher. Yet now it had left its post and was here. Let me sync and check what happened. Hi! By synchronizing with the sprout, I could access its memories and learned that it had been threatened with being used as medicinal material. I understood that it had no choice but to obey Nikolaus. I couldn't scold it for that. Moreover, it had properly switched places with the pink sprout before coming, so I decided to forgive it. Nikolaus was terrifying, after all, a dangerous individual who would threaten a Mandragora with being made into ingredients if it didn't obey. Too scary, I didn't want to get close. So then, this bottle the sprout brought, it looks like the nutritional tonic bottle Nikolaus-san gives to the sprouts, but the color's slightly different. In the green sprout's memory, Nikolaus had called this a nutritional tonic. It seemed different from the usual plant nutrient tonic, and he had gone so far as to threaten a sprout just to send it here. That means I'm supposed to drink it, right? He had said it was inferior to a magic recovery potion, so if it were something I shouldn't drink, I could simply make a superior magic recovery potion and return it. In fact, if he had intended me to drink it and I didn't, he might get even angrier. Remembering his sharp gaze from this morning, I shivered, opened the small bottle, pressed it to my lips, and slowly poured it in. Oh, it might actually be tasty. It's different from plant nutrient tonic. Maybe it's human nutritional tonic. Well, I'm supposed to be human after all, replenished by both the purification flower river water and this tonic. I returned home, since the green sprout had been stuck to Nikolaos the entire time. Perhaps it should rest a little. You can rotate surveillance with the other sprouts if needed. For now, the pink sprout is watching Nikolaos-san. At my new command, the green sprout responded with a salute. Then I suddenly remembered that the pink sprout was wearing a frilly apron like a maid's outfit. The purple and yellow sprouts had villagers who ordered or made clothing for them, and the water sprout, though not wearing conventional clothes, was dyed light blue and had recently been spending time with the village chief Down, appearing quite close. Only this green sprout had not dyed its attire, remaining the natural color of the plant, plain green, more standard and unadorned than the others, with no particularly close villager either. Does that make it lacking individuality? But it resembles me the most, doesn't it? My own clothing was largely the natural green of plants as well, so we were similar. Ordinary was the most reassuring. I wanted to continue living peacefully as an ordinary kind Mandragora. No, as the Flower Witch. Chapter 62, Nikolaos. When he submitted his report about the base, the reply that arrived from the royal capital via a falcon-shaped magic device included an additional request. They wished to ask the Flower Witch to take on other work as well. Seeing that, Nikolaos loudly clicked his tongue, making the green sprout beside him tremble. I'm not angry at you. Watching the green sprout shiver while covering its mouth with its short hands left him with a complicated feeling. Even if he hadn't meant it seriously, perhaps threatening it a few days ago had been a mistake, he couldn't shake the sense that this green sprout was afraid of him. The pink sprout came by occasionally, but the one who mainly stayed near Nikolaos was still the green sprout. Lately, though, he had started to notice it peeking at him from behind objects, so it was probably wary of him. I did use unpleasant wording with the witch, too. Well, still, the fact that she hasn't dismissed her familiars means she's concerned about me. She doesn't hate me, probably. After that, he had sent this green sprout to deliver the nutrient tonic. When it returned without the vial, he assumed the witch had accepted it. Whether she had actually drunk it, he did not know. In the first place, judging by that utterly composed attitude of hers, the witch must be absurdly long-lived. Something trivial wouldn't shake her. A slight lapse in his language wouldn't be enough to make her look down on him, he thought. I have business now anyway. I'll go check on her, better to tell her sooner rather than later. Clutching the letter from the royal capital, he left the house. Naturally, the green sprout followed him. Since it was desperately moving its short legs to keep up, he reluctantly slowed his pace. Ah, it's the magician Sama, hello. What are you doing? Before he could pass through the village, a village girl called out to him. He had no intention of getting deeply involved with humans and meant to pass with only a nod, but something beside the girl caught his interest. It was a Mandragora, dressed in what looked like a dress layered with excessive frills, worn over a yellow cloth that completely wrapped its root portion. The green sprout wore nothing extra, but the pink sprout had been dressed in something like a maid's outfit. Could it be that dressing mandragoras was becoming a trend? We're practicing dancing. Dancing. Yes. Watch. It was common for children to want adults to see what they were doing. Normally, he would have paid no mind and walked past, but he found himself curious about the yellow sprout at his feet. So Nikolaos remained where he was. The girl began singing what was likely a song of her own creation, and in time with it, the yellow sprout started to dance. Its frilled clothes swayed sharply as it performed passionate, vigorous steps. This is far too funny. What is this? Without realizing it, Nikolaos watched through the entire song. Then he looked in turn at the child shining with eyes that seemed to ask, how was it? The yellow sprout frozen in its final pose and the green sprout clapping its short hands together as if applauding, though no sound came from them. He nodded. It's good, isn't it? Yay. The magician Sama praised you, Hikari-chan. It seemed this yellow sprout had been given the nickname Hikari as expected. The witch's familiars each appeared to be acquiring their own individuality. Bidding farewell to the girl and the yellow sprout, as they resumed practicing their song and dance, Nikolaos finally set off toward the witch's house. When he passed the fence at the village exit, he stopped upon noticing yet another mandragora in a pot there. What is this one doing? Does it think it's hiding? The mandragora, exchanging salutes with the green sprout, was wearing something like a hooded cloak, with its flower tucked inside the hood as it sat within the pot. But there was no way that truly concealed it. Apparently it was bad at stealth. Looking at them like this, only green is unchanged. I mean normal. No, is this normal? A Mandragora walking around with awareness at all was a bizarre sight. He realized he had nearly accepted the strange scenery created by the flower witch as normal, his sense of normality being rewritten. That was the side effect of witnessing too many things beyond the norm. In any case, every Mandragora here was strange. If he returned to the royal castle, he might even find stationary Mandragoras lacking. Leaving the village entrance behind, he moved to pass by the teleportation magic circle when something tugged at the hem of his coat. Looking down, he saw the green sprout gripping it and pointing insistently at the location of the teleportation circle with its other hand. Does it mean why not use the magic circle? It seemed that after spending so much time with the green sprout, he had grown accustomed to their wordless communication and could now understand what they wanted to say. Though they had no language, their emotions and intentions were strong, and he could somehow sense them. Ritter seemed to understand the purple sprout well, too. Even without speech, communication was possible. The witch doesn't speak either. Well, that woman can at least write, and her motivations are easier to read than the Mandragoras, devoted, unafraid of self-sacrifice, always concerned with others, a meddlesome caretaker. If one knew those aspects of her, even without her voice, it was possible to understand what the flower witch wanted to do and what she wished to say. I'm not using that to move today. The one I have business with is the witch. Answering the green sprout's unspoken question, he resumed walking toward the witch's house. Before long, as the house came into view, the wolf beast man boy appeared to greet him. Magician Sama, welcome. Witch Sama is waiting for you. Hearing that said with a bright smile, Nikolaus felt slightly relieved, so he wasn't hated after all. Chapter 63. Several days passed after the base was built, and nothing unusual occurred. It seemed there had been no suspicion that I had overdone things and might be some kind of monster. Since then, Green Sprout and Pink Sprout have been taking turns monitoring Nikolaus. However, Pink Sprout is apparently beloved by the villagers as a helper and cannot neglect those friendly ties, so the primary watcher remains Green Sprout. It feels like a signal is coming. Since it's Green Sprout, does it have something to do with Nikolaus-san? The little sprouts can send signals to me, so whenever they have some sort of message, it reaches me. I don't know the details, but I can at least tell that something is happening. I was just about to synchronize with Green Sprout to check when a large presence approached, and I immediately understood the content. I see. It was advance notice that Nikolaus was heading toward this house. Ah, the magician Sama is coming. I'll go greet him. Seeing me suddenly stand up and check myself in the mirror for anything out of place, Noel seemed to sense Nikolaus's visit. He went outside to welcome him. If I know Nikolaus is coming, it's become a habit to put on a veil. Even a single layer of cloth makes a difference, just enough of a barrier to give me a bit more peace of mind. A board I can write on, and the small vial of medicine he gave me before. I don't need to prepare anything else, right? I placed them on the table and finished preparing, but then anxiety crept in. What if he glared at me in a bad mood again? Was there anything else I should have done? In any case, Nikolaus is scary. Maybe I should just put flowers on the table as a sort of screen. Creating an obvious wall of plants would be too blatant, but if I placed a large bloom or arranged a cluster of small flowers in the center of the table, perhaps I could create a subtle little barrier without arousing suspicion. Just as I was thinking that, the door opened and Noel returned with Nikolaus. Behind them, Green Sprout saluted, then disappeared from view as the door closed. I should have placed one of the little sprouts on the table. If I open the door behind them now to fetch one, they might think what the hell is she doing and get suspicious. I didn't make it in time. I'd come up with such a good idea, yet there wasn't enough time to carry it out. I cried out internally in despair, but no one could hear it. If they did, they would die, so it's better that they can't. Noel went into the kitchen to prepare tea for the guest, leaving me alone. Before I could even offer him a seat, Nikolaus sat down as if it were only natural, and I had no choice but to sit across from him. Next time, I will definitely decorate the table with flowers as a partition. He's just too scary. Looks like you drank it properly. Yes, I should write a thank you, right? I wrote on the magical board he had given me. I added thank you, and also it was delicious, including my impression. He snorted at that. Well, he doesn't seem angry, so it's probably fine. Today, I'll talk about work first. There's one request for you from the country. What could it be? Last time it was about cooperating in defense, but Is it additional work? Or did I overdo things at the base and draw suspicion, and now they're going to detain me or summon me for questioning? If that happens, should I run with all my strength or pretend to comply while thinking of a way to slip away? As I trembled inside with fear, Nikolaus let out an exasperated sigh. Don't just smile and accept everything. If it's impossible, you can refuse. Using too much magic power is poisonous for us. From that tone, it's about work. That's a relief. But is it such a difficult job? Here's the letter, in short. They want you to prepare purifying flowers to export to the neighboring country. If you can continue securing them afterward, they'd like as many as possible. Since I can't read modern script, Nikolaus carefully explained it to me. Currently, because poisonous and curse-type monsters have increased, the demon realm has become a contaminated zone. But on this side, the purifying flowers I've grown are holding back the contamination, so there's no impact here. Although the purifying flowers are gradually expanding their range, they haven't reached the opposite side. Right, of course. It's not like the river exists only here. There's a human country beyond the mountains too. I had simply happened to come to this side and forgotten that there might be a human nation beyond the mountains. If that's the case, then just like Bit Village when I first arrived, or Noelle's homeland, there could be human regions suffering terribly under the influence of the demon realm. That would be awful. For now, Lusat isn't suffering that severely. There's a stretch of mountain range on that side. Though that natural region is gradually being eroded, and after confirming our situation here, they're discussing countermeasures. Apparently, there's a country called Lusat beyond the mountains. Because there are no purifying flowers on that side, the demon realm is spreading there. In seeking a breakthrough and coordinating with the kingdom of Veneria, which should have been in the same situation, they learned that thanks to the flower witch spreading purifying flowers, the erosion here has been halted. To prevent further expansion of the demon realm and to protect Lucet, they are requesting cooperation in supplying the flowers. Yes, that's necessary, of course. I'll make as many purifying flowers as needed and send them. Purifying flowers require magic power to multiply. They grow freely here because this land overflows with magic power, but in regions inhabited by humans they cannot spread on their own. The ones here were created through my diversification ability. So if I command them and use magic power, they will multiply easily, but humans cannot cultivate them naturally. If they plant them all along the boundary of the demon realm, they can halt further poison and encroachment. No matter how I think about it, it's a necessary measure. I nodded firmly, but Nikolaus looked distinctly displeased. It's one thing to suppress the demon realm's erosion, but these ongoing demands for purifying flowers after that, they intend to use them to improve sanitation across the entire country. I don't think you owe them that much. Public health, huh? This village started with nothing but simple toilets and cesspits, perhaps because it's a remote countryside with few magical tools. Bit Village didn't have proper water and sewage systems. Cities might be different, but if it's about improving human sanitation, I don't mind cooperating. Surely everyone will be grateful to me and acknowledge that the flower witch is truly useful. I nodded again, but Nikolaus's expression grew even more displeased. Why? Creating purifying flowers uses magic power, doesn't it? I can't multiply them like you can since you've mastered plant magic. They're relying entirely on you, and the amount they're asking for isn't small. At the very least, demand something in return. You don't seem interested in wealth, but isn't there anything you need? Something I need. Then the plant nutrient tonic Nikolaus had made and given to the little sprouts. That's what I want. It's probably more effective for me than magic recovery potions. I've never actually tasted it myself, even though I'm the main body. If I say it's for growing flowers, it shouldn't seem unnatural to request it. Thinking that, I wrote on the board and showed it to Nikolaus. I want the nutrient tonic you made. Seeing that, Nikolaus looked momentarily stunned, then lowered his head for some reason and let out a long sigh. Fine. I'll make as much as you want. I'll have them prepare the finest ingredients and make it. With that, the deal was settled. While I signed the letter, Nikolaus kept turning his face away for some reason. Chapter 64. After taking a breather with the tea Noelle had brought, Nikolaus gave a light cough to reset the mood and began speaking about business once more. You've got that merchant you favor, right? He has connections here with the Lord of the Elnat territory, and his background is solid. We'll handle the transactions through him, so all you need to do is increase the purifying flowers. It seemed that Eli would be taking charge of trading the purifying flowers, and I learned something for the first time. Apparently, he even does business with the lords. What I remember about him the most is him constantly rubbing his hands together while flattering me. So I'd always thought of him as a rather eccentric merchant at best, the sort who would even come to a remote place like this to peddle goods. But to think he was a major merchant who dealt directly with lords, it surprised me a little. But that makes sense. Eli was the one who brought that mirror, but the true sender was Nikolaus. Just remembering it is scary. And Nikolaus usually lives in the royal castle, so he is close to royalty and nobility. If that was the case, then Eli, who had been entrusted with the mirror by him, must also be connected to that circle. I hadn't considered that at all. And on another matter, I have something else I'd like to consult you about. When Nikolaus said he had something to discuss, I instinctively braced myself. I couldn't shake the anxiety over what kind of topic might come out next. I clasped my hands tightly together on top of the table and waited for his next words. It's about your familiars. They've got strong personalities, but they haven't evolved as monsters, have they? They've remained harmless and have blended into the village this well. I'd like to try an evolution experiment. That means you want to level up the saplings? The proposal was completely unexpected. The saplings are meant to be harmless, powerless. That's why I've only allowed them to evolve enough to be able to run and to have their voices sealed so they don't suddenly scream. Well, in Purple's case, I did give one extra evolution command to take on a female body shape. But aside from that, nothing else. That's precisely why the saplings are frail and incapable, harmless because they can do nothing. I never imagined a human would deliberately suggest giving monsters more power. As expected, Nikolaus is unusual, especially that purple one. I'm very interested in whether it's possible for her to produce offspring with a human. Ah, I see. Ritter. So that's what they've been talking about lately. Ritter and Nikolaus had been deep in conversation, and Leonhard had looked quite lonely. He'd even gone so far as to seek conversation with a witch he'd barely spoken to before. But for Ritter, who genuinely seems to have romantic feelings for the purple sapling, the biggest issue must be the barrier between species. I have no idea how anyone even arrives at the idea of a plant and a human producing offspring, but he's serious about it, and Nikolaus seems willing to entertain it. Since it's the humans who came up with this, it should be fine, right? If I were the one raising the saplings with the intent of turning them into dangerous monsters, I might be branded a dangerous witch. But if Nikolaus, a court mage, is saying he wants to do this, then surely it's not a problem. And above all, Nikolaus is the sort of mad scientist who loves experiments like this. While he's absorbed in the saplings, his attention won't be directed at me. Something made clear by how he's left me alone these past few days. I'd like the saplings to serve as my substitute. When I nodded, I caught sight of him lifting the corner of his mouth in a rare smirk. It was so frightening that a small scream echoed inside me. Well, I won't do anything bad. Your Mandragora familiars have strong wills, don't they? If they don't like my request, make sure they know they can refuse. Do they really have such strong wills? Well, maybe I just don't notice because they're obedient to me. They do seem to be developing their own personalities. Maybe something like self-awareness is growing. Of course, it's also possible it's all an act. They're simply following the first command I gave them. Be harmless and appear cute. Each of them is striving to embody what they believe to be harmless and cute, but since there's variation and individuality among them, perhaps they truly do have their own will and thoughts. But to level up, they'll have to defeat monsters. I'm worried about making the saplings fight. A mandragora that can't scream is just a plant. The saplings, whose voices I've sealed so they can't harm humans, have no means of attack. Their roots can absorb a little magic power, but unlike me, they don't cause anything they touch to wither away instantly. I should at least give them some form of self-defense. Not for attacking, more like a capturing net. I've already been warned that the number of people coming and going will increase, and that dangerous individuals might enter as well. To preserve my image as a useful and benevolent witch, the saplings should be able to resist in some way if the villagers are ever in danger. If the Mandragoras show any changes, I'll share them. And if you notice anything, I'd like you to tell me as well. Research requires many opinions and perspectives. I'll bring nutrient solution regularly. You don't need to bring it regularly. Once in bulk is fine. Though I tremble inside at the thought of Nikolaus visiting frequently, my lips still curve into a bright smile. Seeing Nikolaus smile faintly in return makes it even more terrifying. His mind must already be filled with sapling experiments. That Mad Scientist, Chapter 64.5, Nikolaus, Part 1. The witch welcomed Nikolaus with her usual smile, looking lively and not weakened in the slightest. He also noticed the small, empty vial of nutrient tonic he had given her a few days earlier resting on the table, so it was of some use. There was no way he wouldn't worry about one of his own kind, who pushed herself recklessly simply because she possessed power. Compared to her, Nikolaus was still a fledgling, but if there was something he could do, then that was enough. At times like this, he was reminded of just how useful the flower witch's plant magic was. If one mastered the handling of plants, then medicines derived from them could be produced freely at any time. If he could do the same, healing the witch's fatigue would have been possible for Nikolaus as well. A demon folk who has mastered a single type of magic can become this strong in comparison. I'm jack of all trades, but master of none. I thought being versatile would let me be useful, but it's frustrating that it doesn't quite work that way. When he looked at the flower witch, he sometimes wondered whether he should even now choose one thing and dedicate himself to mastering it, but he had no idea what to choose at this point. Seeing her, he couldn't even imagine a magic beyond hers. She truly had chosen well. Plants supported the very foundation of human life. They could provide clothing, food, and shelter. If one could handle every kind of plant, people would never struggle to live. That must be it. That's why she chose plant magic, because it was a power that supported so many people. Watching the witch smile before him, he found himself thinking that must have been her reason. Nikolaus still had no reason strong enough to choose a single path of magic. Still, he wished he could at least support the fellow of his kind who tended to stride too far ahead on her own. Looks like you drank it properly. For now, this was the extent of what he could do. But someday he wanted to become someone she could rely on, someone equal to her, someone who would not let her push herself alone. As Nikolaus thought this, the witch smiled and wrote words on the drawing board he had given her before, then showed it to him.
Thank you. It was delicious. Flattery.
To avoid hurting me, perhaps. As always, she treats me like a child. That nutrient tonic had been devised by Nikolaus with nothing but efficiency in mind. It could not honestly be called good tasting. For her to smile brightly and praise it as delicious was likely a consideration, words chosen because she thought it was something a younger one had worked hard to make. It's not like I can make something as efficient and tasty as you can right now, but that's only because I've never had anyone worth considering the taste for. Just wait. Next time he would improve the flavor as well and produce something beyond reproach. Having someone other than oneself does change the purpose of creation. But that wasn't why he had come today. There was the matter of his familiar's evolution, and before that, a request from the kingdom. Today I'll talk about work first. There's one request for you from the country. As he spread out the delivered letter, he made sure to warn the witch, who seemed ready to accept anything with a smile. An overly capable person who overworked herself was troublesome. Don't just smile and accept everything. If it's impossible, you can refuse. Using too much magic power is poisonous for us. The more magic power they use, the weaker demon folk become. If their magic remained depleted for a prolonged period, their bodies, usually remaining untouched by the ravages of time, would age. When filled with magic, demons were strong, but as it diminished, the risks rose accordingly. It's true this witch has increased the purifying flowers throughout the village and even along the riverside and at the edge of the demon realm. But still, how casually they say to just grow more. Even for Nikolaus, increasing purifying flowers was difficult. He did not wield plant magic to her level, so his efficiency was poor. At most he could grow 1 or 2 in a day, yet the witch could cause them to bloom in large numbers in a single day. But that was the result of her devotion, not something easy. Purifying flowers consumed tremendous magic power to multiply. Normally they'd parasitize monsters, draining their magic, their life to multiply. And yet they're asking one person to do it on their own. This witch has already contributed more than enough to the country, and now they want to use her for diplomacy too. If they had purifying flowers, they could gain diplomatic advantage over the neighboring nation of Lusat. No matter how many antidotes they produced to counter the toxins overflowing from the desolate lands, it was a temporary fix. The source itself was corrupted. They needed to cut it off or purify it before it reached human territory. If they attempted it with magical tools, it would require enormous magic power, and continually producing antidotes would be costly. But if they could create a boundary of purifying flowers, human labor would no longer be needed. and they even want her to prepare more than Lusat's required amount. Do they have flowers blooming in their heads? Even within the Veneria kingdom, only urban areas had fully developed water and sewage systems. They likely wanted to distribute purifying flowers to rural regions to improve sanitation and reduce outbreaks of disease. The face of the elderly minister who likely proposed this floated to mind, and he almost clicked his tongue. There was no need for one witch to devote herself so far. Even so, after he told her that, she smiled and nodded in acceptance. He understood that was simply her nature, but it left him dissatisfied. Creating purifying flowers uses magic power, doesn't it? I can't multiply them like you can since you've mastered plant magic. They're relying entirely on you, and the amount they're asking for isn't small. At the very least, demand something in return. You don't seem interested in wealth, but isn't there anything you need? In this matter, Nikolaus could offer no assistance. It was something only she could do. But since it was such a massive undertaking, she ought to make bold demands in return. Even if she had no interest in treasure, she could request conditions or rights, rare foreign plants perhaps, or funding to establish a botanical research institute. She should gain something beneficial to herself. The witch nodded at his suggestion, then smoothly wrote on the drawing board and showed it to him. "I want the nutrient tonic you made." The words struck him, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. He lowered his gaze, taking a deep breath to prevent the smile threatening to spread across his face. "You've got to be kidding. This witch, of all things she could ask for, she chooses my nutrient tonic." That meant that to her, Nikolaus's nutrient tonic held more value than treasure. Had she seen through his private wish to be useful, or had she genuinely acknowledged his work? Either way, he couldn't bring himself to lift his face. "Fine. I'll make as much as you want. I'll have them prepare the finest ingredients and make it." He would improve upon the original formula and create something even better, though lately it has become difficult to use Mandragora as an ingredient. Improvements might prove challenging. Chapter 64.6. Nikolaus Part 2. The witch's request asking for Nikolaus's nutrient tonic in return for the purifying flowers hardly seemed like fair compensation. After pondering for a while whether that was truly enough, Nikolaus suddenly had a thought. Could it be she wants to see me? At present, Nikolaus was staying in Bit Village, but ordinarily he lived in a chamber within the royal castle in the capital, on standby to deploy from the capital at any time of crisis or to defend it. Right now, Bit Village was closest to potential danger. But after overcoming the monster disaster and once peace fully returned, Nikolaus would no longer be needed here and would return to the capital. And once that happened, there would be fewer reasons to visit Bit Village without cause to see the witch. If it's a nutrient tonic I made, there's a high chance I'll be the one delivering it. Heh, that's clever. If the amount matched the value of the purifying flowers, then a considerable quantity would be required. That would give Nikolaus reason to visit the witch frequently. In that case, her proposal made sense. In other words, in exchange for taking on the purifying flower task, she wanted arrangements that would allow her to see her fellow kind. Negotiations like that would not be difficult. The country must be aware that it was placing a heavy burden on her. It would likely accept conditions that allowed the witch and Nikolaus to meet from time to time.
"Please have some tea. Purifying flower tea. I brought some as a gift the other day. Do you like this?"
It is Witch Sama's favorite tea. I don't dislike it either. While the witch signed the document, Noel brought in purifying flower tea. With its rising floral fragrance and nourishing qualities, it was not an exaggeration to call it a specialty that could only be enjoyed in this village overflowing with purifying flowers. When Noel brewed it, it tasted richer and carried more sweetness than when Nikolaus prepared it himself. Since it was not widely distributed, perhaps Noel had studied how to brew it properly. He seemed to be doing his best as a retainer. Right, there was another matter today. This isn't the time to relax. The witch's house was strangely comfortable, thanks to the bellflowers playing soft melodies indoors and the patches of sound-muffling grass growing along the walls. All stray noise was gently suppressed, and the air produced by the plants felt fresh and clean. The only strongly scented flowers were those worn by the witch herself. The other plants indoors barely gave off fragrance, likely by design so the smell would not become overpowering. She had truly created a pleasant home. He had nearly forgotten his purpose, tempted to linger lazily. "And on another matter, I have something else I'd like to consult you about." As he began, the witch folded her hands together on the table, smiling brightly. She seemed genuinely interested, making it easier for Nikolaus to speak. He promptly asked whether he might conduct an evolution experiment on her Mandragora familiars. The plant monsters she managed were all low-level and frail. That was likely why she could make them her familiars in the first place, and if increasing their levels caused them to break free of her control, that would be a problem. But unless we try, that eccentric assistant's wish won't be fulfilled, and personally, I'm extremely curious. If a monster possessed intelligence, it could choose its own direction of evolution. Most monsters focused on becoming larger and stronger to increase their survival. But if it could understand human language and had formed friendly bonds with humans, it might evolve in a different direction. In other words, if the purple sapling was close enough to Ritter to be considered lovers, it might evolve toward being able to leave offspring with a human. Well, even for Mandragoras with strong wills, it was unclear whether they would desire that much. There was only one way to find out. It shouldn't head in a dangerous direction. The witch forbids harming humans. As long as they remain under her control, the risk level shouldn't increase. Whether it was possible depended on the witch's reaction, yet she showed little hesitation and nodded in agreement. It seemed she was confident that even if her familiars' levels increased, they would not break free of her control. And the fact that she readily entrusted them to Nikolaus's personal experiment meant she trusted him not to cause her harm. This is starting to get fun. He could tell his lips were curling upward. Lately, Nikolaus had been smiling more often, ever since realizing he was not alone in this world. There had been a time when he felt something close to anger, wondering why she had left him alone for 500 years, but that no longer mattered. A witch who paid such close attention to him now must have had reasons she could not speak of, and he no longer doubted that she cared for him as one of her own. After all, there were only 2 of them in this world. No matter how many humans died in the future, unless there was an accident, the 2 of them would continue living. Even if they lost everyone else, they were unlikely to lose each other. Of course, they would look out for one another. In the end, I'm the same. Well, since you can't honestly say you want to see me, I'll be considerate. There were plenty of reasons to come visit. The Mandragora research, the nutrient tonic she had requested. Surely the witch was expecting that. Surely she had accepted the burdens placed upon her because she hoped Nikolaus would come see her. If the Mandragoras show any changes, I'll share them, and if you notice anything, I'd like you to tell me as well. Research requires many opinions and perspectives. I'll bring nutrient solution regularly. When he made it clear he would come visit, the witch's smile deepened with visible delight. Honestly, she was easy to read. This older fellow of his kind was troublesome, and yet seeing her pleased just at the thought of him coming to see her struck him as faintly endearing. Chapter 65. For the job I had taken on from the country through Nikolaus, I was increasing the number of purification flowers by the riverside. Growing purification flowers consumes magic power, so rather than raising them from seeds, it was easier to command the already lively, fully grown flowers to multiply. Sitting on the riverbank with my feet dipped in the water to replenish my energy, I steadily increased the number of purification flowers around me. Noel was helping by transferring the newly multiplied flowers into empty pots. Huh? Noel's clothes seem kinda small. Did he grow again? Beastmen apparently have short lifespans, so they grow fast too. He'll need new clothes. Next time the market opens, I should get Noel some new clothes. The shopkeeper and designer query who handled clothing was quite frightening because she tried to observe me from head to toe, but for Noel, who always worked so hard, I had to go. No, if possible, I'd rather just give him money and let him shop freely. Being scrutinized that closely made me nervous that she might notice the unnaturalness of my artificial body. Witch-sama, it seems a visitor has arrived. It might be Sir Leonhardt. Should I tell him you're here? You can't even see him, but you know. Beastmen's senses really are sharp. At Noel's words, as he suddenly looked up from his work, I nodded. He washed his dirt-covered hands in the river and then ran off toward the front of the house. If Leonhardt had come, it must be for something. So I stopped working. I pulled my feet out of the river, recreated my shoes from plants, and headed toward the front entrance. Witch-sama, Sir Leonhardt brought this as a gift. It seemed Noel and Leonhardt had just finished exchanging greetings outside the house. Apparently, he had received a whole wild bird as a present, and Noel held it up happily to show me. The feathers hadn't even been plucked yet, so it must be fresh, perhaps just caught. Even though I don't eat meat itself, I can drink the soup infused with its nutrients, and Noel, who is still growing, can eat the meat. It was a very welcome gift. Witch Dono, hello. I'm glad to see you're doing well. Ah, The last time we met was when we were building the base. He was still worried. Leonhardt looked at me and narrowed one eye in relief. I remembered giving him a 4-leaf clover when he had been worried I might be overusing my magic power. I had recovered quickly afterward and felt no lingering fatigue. Even so, had he come all this way just to check on me. Today, do you happen to have time? I'm off duty today and have the whole day free. If you have a moment, I was hoping we could share some tea somewhere. Ah, right. I did say I'd be his conversation partner. Come to think of it, he's dressed a bit more casually today. Leonhardt usually wore full armor. But today, although he carried his sword, he wasn't wearing it. It must be his day-off attire. I didn't have any urgent matters today, so I nodded, thinking a bit of conversation would be fine. As Noel watched us back and forth, his ears and tail seemed to droop slightly as if lacking energy. Which Sama with Sir Leonhardt? Well, never mind. Should I stay outside and work? Yes, please. I can't let him hear my voice. Understood. I'll finish preparing the bird and continue transferring the purification flowers into pots. Call me if you need anything. What an observant child. I hadn't even asked yet, and he was already offering to leave. As I watched his back, his tail hanging lower than usual, I wondered a little why he seemed so down. I seemed to have caused a misunderstanding. Huh? What misunderstanding? I tilted my head at Leonhardt's wry smile. To begin with, I lived surrounded by all kinds of misunderstandings from humans. One misunderstanding led to another, and the idolized flower witch had been created. Who knew how far Noel's image of Witch Sama had progressed? In other words, it was difficult for me to even imagine how far their misunderstandings had gone. After all, I was just a Mandragora pretending to be human. There was no such thing as the witch they imagined. I'll correct it later, so please don't worry. Well, okay, I'll leave that to you. For now, please come inside. I opened the door and invited Leonhardt in, guiding him to the table. Then I realized Noel, who usually prepared tea for guests, wasn't there? Come to think of it, I've never used the kitchen. For now, I stepped into the kitchen space and checked what was there. But even trying to boil water, I didn't know how to use the stove. I somehow found a pot of hot water and tea leaves from the purification flowers, and just then, Leonhardt came over. I might have fumbled around too much and kept him waiting. I feel bad having you do everything, Witch Dono. Allow me to help. Should I brew this tea? Good, let's have him do it. Then I'll look for some snacks. Nodding, I left the tea to Leonhardt and took out some sweets Noel had made from the shelf. Though I wouldn't eat them, they were for Leonhardt. I knew they were always prepared for guests, so it should be fine. Thinking that, I arranged them on a plate and carried them to the table together with Leonhardt, who had just finished brewing the tea. He seems kind of happy? Even though he's a guest, he doesn't look bothered at all about helping. Meanwhile, I was surprised at how completely incapable I was, always leaving everything to Noel. After all, I didn't even know how to use the stove. Apparently it was some kind of magical tool, a stove-like device I wasn't familiar with. To begin with, I could produce fire and water myself, so I didn't really understand how to use human tools. Maybe next time I should watch what Noel does. At the very least, I should know how to use the stove. We sat across from each other at the table. The house walls were properly covered with soundless grass, so there was no worry about sound leaking outside, and I could speak here, but starting a conversation was difficult. How do humans talk again? I should say something. As I flustered in the growing silence, Leonhardt smiled awkwardly, his brows lowering slightly. I wanted to talk with you, Witch Dono, but now that we're actually like this, I find myself too nervous to speak. It seemed even Leonhardt, who was usually easygoing, felt the same. That reassured me a little. Even if Ritter wasn't around, chatting with a witch he rarely interacted with would make him nervous too. Which meant my own nervousness wasn't strange. In fact, it was a very human reaction. Me too. Trying to appear human, I expressed that I felt the same. Leonhardt looked a little surprised, then smiled happily. Chapter 66. We do seem to get along with you, Witch Dono. We even share a common concern, and I feel you're easier to talk to than anyone else. That shared concern must be the curse. Leonhardt was under the impression that my voice was cursed to invoke hate for myself and others. Since I couldn't let anyone hear it unless they were immune to curses, I didn't deny it. Because of this, I don't have anyone I can truly be myself with, so I have no one I can call a friend. That was unexpected. Leonhardt was well liked. Not only by the knights but by the villagers as well. Even Noel, who had been wary of him at first, now accepted him and seemed attached to him. Kind, gentle in demeanor, and polite to everyone. A model knight who willingly throws himself into danger to protect others. That was how everyone saw him. But I see everyone respects him, but they're not his friends. Come to think of it, I don't have any friends either. Thinking about the people around me, I realized I didn't have anyone I could call a friend. Noel, the closest to me, was my attendant, and the villagers revered me as Witch Sama, but that was respect or worship, not friendship. As for Nikolaus, it goes without saying. His attitude toward me had softened recently, but I was still someone he needed to be wary of. After all, it would be disastrous if he discovered my true nature. In other words, I was floating alone. That might be a problem. It was like I wasn't grounded, like I wasn't properly blending in among humans. And so the reason I asked to spend time speaking with you like this is actually because I wanted to become your friend. A friend? Yes. There's no one else I can confide my troubles in, and I thought that you too might be able to speak with me. He gently touched the eye patch covering his left eye. To Leonhardt, I was someone who shared his curse, so it was easier for him to talk. If he was hiding his curse while interacting with others, it must have been difficult. So it was only natural that two people with the same burden would want to become friends who could share their true feelings. In reality, my curse is a bit different, but this offer isn't bad. Between a suspicious witch with not a single friend and a witch who even a knight would befriend warmly, the latter was clearly more human. For such calculated reasons, I decided to accept Leonhardt's proposal. I'd be happy to be your friend. More than happy, it was beneficial. By all means, I wanted him to spread the word that I was the friend of a harmless, kind witch with nothing to hide. Hearing my answer, Leonhardt let out a relieved breath and smiled. I'm glad. From now on, please treat me well as your friend, Witch Dono. Good, I've escaped being a lonely witch. Rather, thank you for suggesting it, Leonhardt. I had been focused on blending in with humans while hiding that I was a monster, but the idea of making friends had completely slipped my mind. I had thought I was fitting in despite having no friends at all, so I was glad he made me realize it. Well, perhaps I was being a bit too calculating, but Leonhardt was kind to me, and I wanted to be kind to him as well. Since this was a friendship between a human and a plant, it was only natural that it would differ from human friendships. That's what I told myself. I intend to keep the 4-leaf clover you gave me as a charm. Having a friend wishing for my happiness, I feel I can return alive from any battlefield. So, a 4-leaf clover has that kind of meaning? It's kind of like a good luck charm, like a frog amulet or something. I had given it to him without much thought, but apparently it served as a charm. However, it was just a normal 4-leaf clover. It would wither soon. Wouldn't that mean the luck would fade as well? As I tilted my head, Leonhardt hurriedly explained that he had pressed it into a dried flower and was carrying it with him. Even as a pressed flower, it's still fragile. Ah, I know. Then I could coat it to make it sturdier. If I encased it in something solid, it wouldn't tear. Do you still have it? Yes. Give it to me for a moment. Though he seemed a little confused, he took out a small pouch from his chest, then unfolded a piece of paper inside it. The pressed 4-leaf clover was stored within, but as expected, it looked fragile enough to break easily. That wouldn't do for a charm. Resin and a hardening agent. It was the same material I had used when making the table for Nikolaus's inn. It would form a lump with properties similar to amber, so it should become durable. I cupped the pressed clover in both hands, encased it in resin, and then handed it back to Leonhardt. Should be fine now. I see. Thank you, Witch Dono. I will return to my friend, no matter what. He received the clover sealed in amber-like resin, closed his hand tightly around it, and held it firmly. I felt a little nervous that he might crush it with that grip, but he safely placed it back into the pouch and hung it around his neck beneath his clothes, which reassured me. Giving a charm to a friend who works a dangerous job, that's something very human. And now I've made my first friend today really feels like I've done something human-like. Yes, I've lived like a human. Surely I had taken another step toward becoming a kind, human-like witch. Satisfied, I took a sip of the tea Leonhardt had brewed. Noel's tea tasted better. Chapter 66.5. Noel, whose life had been saved by the flower witch, took pride in living as her attendant. He wanted to support her and repay his debt for the rest of his life. Though she possessed immense power, the witch had lost her voice in exchange and could not speak with others. However, Noel could somehow understand what she wished to convey, allowing him to serve as an intermediary. This is probably thanks to a beastman's keen instincts. I'm glad I was born a beastman. Beastmen were a race that often became attendants to demonkind. Perhaps because of their shorter lifespans, demonkind tended to live in ways that often strayed from human norms, and beastmen, as a race, were better able to intuitively understand such behavior. I'll stay by Witch Sama's side until the day I die and be useful to her. Isn't that fine? That was Noel's only wish. However, as possibly the sole survivor of his village, he also carried the role of leaving behind a descendants to carry on his bloodline. Because beastmen had short lifespans, they rarely married other races. There were no others of his kind in Bit Village, and someday he might have to go out and search for fellow beastmen. Leaving the Flower Witch's side, the time I can remain a child probably won't last much longer. I don't want to grow up. His body was steadily growing larger. It made him happy to become stronger, able to be more useful to the witch. But becoming an adult also meant having to think about responsibilities and roles different from those of a child. At night, alone in his room, he found himself thinking in circles more often in front of a statue of a goddess that resembled the witch. "Goddess Sama, what should I do?" The statue, modeled after a deity, bore a gentle smile much like the flower witch's, yet it neither moved nor spoke. This was something Noel would have to think through and decide for himself. One day, the witch began increasing the number of purification flowers at Nikolaus's request. He had heard from Down that these flowers could not multiply naturally, instead requiring vast amounts of magic power. It must be a burden for the witch as well, yet she showed no sign of reluctance and continued growing the flowers for the sake of people in a neighboring country. Watching her, Noel thought he wanted to become a fine adult who could devote himself to others like she did, and he worked diligently at his tasks. The area around the witch's house was full of plants, and the scent of greenery was strong. That was why he could immediately tell when a person approached: soap and disinfectant, and a bit of blood, maybe even the smell of animals. Many people carried the scent of soap, but those who smelled of disinfectant or blood were few. Someone who cared about cleanliness, yet was prone to injury, most likely a member of the Knights. And if it was someone visiting this house, it could only be Leonhardt. After calling out to the witch, Noel headed to the front of the house. Just as he did, the guest who had been about to knock turned around. As expected, it was the one-eyed knight, Leonhardt. "Noel Dono, hello. Are you here to see Witch Sama?" "It's nothing important. I happened to catch a wild bird this morning, so I thought I'd share." "Wow, that's a fine duck. Thank you very much." The smell of blood had apparently come from this gift. Leonhardt himself might have had minor injuries, but as always, he smelled clean and fresh. The only time he had carried a foul odor was when Noel encountered him after he had been exposed to a monster's poison. People all had their own particular habits, and their scent changed depending on how they lived and what they ate. Among all the humans Noel had met, Leonhardt was the one whose scent was the faintest. He must have lived an extremely disciplined life. As Noel received the duck, the witch returned from the river. She carried only the scent of flowers. Sometimes it even felt as though a flower itself had come to life and was walking. Though that couldn't possibly be true. Witch Sama, Sir Leonhardt brought this as a gift. When Noel held up the duck, she smiled happily. Though she did not eat meat, she would drink the broth from it, and Noel would have the chance to cook. "Witch Dono, hello. I'm glad to see you're doing well." When Leonhardt spoke to the witch, his expression changed ever so slightly. It was hard to say how many others noticed this, but it was clear that the witch was special to him, just as she was to Noel. At Leonhardt's invitation, the witch smiled and nodded. Accepting tea in the middle of work meant that, for her, this took priority. Could it be that Leonhardt is special to Witch Sama too? A sharp, prickling feeling pierced Noel's chest, and he left the scene as if fleeing. Perhaps working would distract him. But even after carefully preparing the bird, wrapping it in preserving leaves, and resuming the task of transferring purification flowers into pots, his mood remained heavy. I don't want her to be taken away. That's childish, and I shouldn't think that. Witch Sama doesn't belong to anyone, and besides, I'm a beastman. To Noel, the witch was someone special, his savior, his respected master, and the person of demon folk he admired. That was precisely why he could never stand beside her as an equal. Beastmen were a race with short lifespans among humans. They could not live as long as demon kind. The adults had always said that beastmen must never fall in love with demon folk. If I weren't a beastman, no, there's no point thinking about that. Because I am a beastman, I was taken in as her attendant and can be useful. I won't forget the pride of my race. But feelings were not so easily controlled. His body was growing, and before long, he would no longer have to look up at her, he would be tall enough to look down instead. The thought made his heart race a little, yet it was also proof that his flow of time differed from hers. So this feeling must be temporary, like a passing illness. Someday it would fade, and he would be able to swallow it down. Noel Dono, thank you for your hard work. Before I take my leave, I thought I'd greet you as well. Sir Leonhardt, after spending some time with the witch, Leonhardt came to say a word before leaving. His sincerity, even toward a child, was why he was respected by villagers and fellow knights, and likely why, among humans aside from Nikolaus, the witch was closest to him. I thought so earlier, but you've grown again. Yes, I'm a beast man. I think I've entered a growth spurt. I'll grow quickly and before long. Noel trailed off and lowered his gaze, thinking that his lifespan was probably shorter than even Leonhardt's. The knight stepped closer and crouched in front of him. Before, their eyes would have met at that height, but now Noel was looking down at him. That alone proved how much he had grown. Witch Donna is demon-kind, so she is different from us. Even so, she must treasure the time she spends with you now. And besides, it seems she would be troubled without you, Noel Dono. Without me? Yes. She tried to prepare tea, but she seemed a bit flustered. Normally, Noel handled tea and meals, and the witch never used the kitchen. She probably didn't even know where the utensils were. Imagining her tilting her head in confusion, a rare sight for someone who always carried herself with calm composure. Noel smiled a little. It seemed he had become part of her daily life. I'm glad. It looks like you've cheered up a bit. I was worried I might have caused a misunderstanding earlier. I'm the same as you. I simply wish to devote myself to supporting her. I may not always be able to return, but I intend to do what I can as a knight until the very end. It seemed Noel had misunderstood. He had thought Leonhardt was someone special to the witch. After all, they had arranged to share tea despite her inability to speak. But that wasn't the case. Because from the witch's perspective, neither Leonhardt nor Noel could share her time. And above all, as a knight, Leonhardt might lose his life at any moment. Perhaps even sooner than Noel. That was the meaning behind his words. I'll do everything I can for Witch Sama, too, until the very end. Then we are comrades. Let's do our best together. Leonhardt stood and gently extended his fist. Noel lightly bumped his own against it, and as motivation welled up inside him, his tail began to sway. Then I'll head back to Witch Sama. Yes, until next time. He was seen off with a smile and returned to the house with light steps. When he opened the door, the witch was holding a pot and tea leaves, smiling warmly at him. Perhaps she had been waiting, hoping Noel would come back and make the tea. Shall I brew some tea? She nodded with a gentle smile. It seemed Noel was needed by the witch, and that made him feel proud and happy. Chapter 67. I accepted a job request from Nikolaus, made a friend named Leonhardt, and found myself gradually becoming a cog of human society. I couldn't help but smirk at that reality. It felt like I was blending in well with humans. Oh, right. I was thinking of giving the sprouts some means of self-defense. For now, I'll call over one that's nearby. I called over the sprout closest to the house that wasn't on lookout duty. As I waited in front of the house, basking in the sunlight, I soon spotted a small figure running toward me at a quick pace. What appeared was a light blue sprout wearing a hooded cloak. It seems Downsan gave it that. Apparently it's useful when playing hide-and-seek with the kids. Since the light blue cloth doesn't blend into the surroundings, it stands out quite a bit. When playing with the children, it would get spotted immediately in hiding games, so Down, taking pity on it, gave it this plain hooded cloak. All right, for now, I'll let this one carry it as a test. If it keeps it hidden under the cloak, it won't stand out. The fruit used by that plant-type monster that fires something like a seed machine gun contains a sticky net like a spider's web. When it hits something, it bursts and releases that net. Originally, it's meant to capture prey so the creature can approach and swallow it whole. In other words, while it has high capturing ability, it doesn't injure what it hits. It's a tool with very little danger, unlikely to be seen as a dangerous weapon. I made something like a toy air gun that can shoot those by loading them into a tube and popping them out. I handed it to the light blue sprout. You're not allowed to use it normally, but if someone's in danger, or if you're in danger, you can use it to help or escape. It seems like more people might come. And we can't rule out that bad ones might appear too. The sprout hid the air gun inside its cloak and tied it to its back with a string, then nodded. Looking at it now, it seemed a bit like a sniper. Well, in the end, it's just a toy air gun that shoots plant pellets with no real firepower. With its task done, the light blue sprout ran back toward the village. As for whether to give the other sprouts those guns, I'll decide after observing the villagers for a while. Witch Sama, what brings you outside? Noelle, you're done harvesting. Good work. Your clothes really are getting small. Autumn is a season of abundance. Noelle returned with a basket full of food he had gathered. Chestnuts, mushrooms, and other typical autumn delicacies. What caught my attention was how short his sleeves had become. It's fully autumn now, and it should be chilly. His ears and tail were slightly puffed up too, making me think he might be cold. Right. Maybe I should make something like a warm cape or poncho. I got the idea from the cloak the sprout was wearing. It doesn't need to be long, more like a cape or poncho, a sleeveless outer garment that could still be used even if he grows quickly. Thinking that, I started weaving fibers together. Fur would be ideal, but with my diversification ability, I can only produce plants I've absorbed, though I might be able to create something animal-like using the Baromet's ability that bears sheep. That would be far too inhuman to do in front of people. So instead, I stuffed cotton into the woven fabric and placed it over Noel's shoulders. Wow, it's warm. Thank you, Witch Sama. Just bear with that until we can get you new clothes at the next market. Query, being a professional in clothing, could surely make something both functional and stylish. As I was thinking of asking her at the next market, Eli happened to visit that very afternoon. Witch-san, as radiant as ever today, with such a beautiful smile, how delightful. If anything, he seemed to be the one in high spirits, grinning widely while rubbing his hands together like he was about to start a fire through friction. His cute four-leaf clover carriage and his suspicious merchant demeanor were quite the mismatch. Meanwhile, beside him stood Query holding a sketchbook and pen, looking at me with an extremely pleased expression, as if she were licking her eyes over me. No matter how many times I see you, you are perfect, unchanged, flawlessly beautiful. No, perhaps your hair has gained even more luster than before. Should I say your beauty has only deepened? Eek, she hasn't realized this body is artificial, right? I'm okay, right? My body is artificial, so it doesn't change like a human's. I don't gain or lose weight since I don't have fat. At most, better nutrition just improves the sheen of my flowers, but it seemed like Query could see even that, and I trembled inwardly. Being in front of her is scary. I decided to hide behind Noel. Placing my hands on his shoulders, I had him stand between me and Query. Noelle, having grown a bit taller, nicely blocked her line of sight. Hello, Query-san? Oh my. Hello. Well, you've grown. You'll need clothes that fit your height. Shall I pick something out for you? Yes, please. Noelle's tail looked slightly downcast. Maybe he's not very comfortable around Query either. And yet I'm using him as a shield. I feel a bit guilty. Using a child as a shield brings a twinge of guilt. But I'm scared of being found out, so I'd really like him to stay in front. I'm truly sorry. Then it's settled. And that outerwear, may I take a closer look? This must have been created by Witch Sama with magic. Ah, I see. You've stuffed it with cotton to make it warm. Lighter than animal fur, yet still warm. It truly reflects Witch Sama's kindness toward Noelle-kun. Yes, I was only half listening to Query's machine gun-like chatter when Noel responded brightly. His tail was wagging energetically now. It seems he's not that uncomfortable around her after all. Then I'll have him keep being my shield without hesitation. This person feels like she can see through everything just by looking scary. Chapter 68. We'll be holding another market soon. So today I came to give my greetings and hand over the earnings. Query here had deliveries to make in the village, but she insisted on seeing you as well, Witch-san. After all, Witch-sama is beautiful no matter how many times I see her. It's truly inspiring. I see this makes me so nervous. Can't they just take a picture or something and go back? There should be magic tools like cameras, right? It seemed Query hadn't come for any particular business, just simply to see me, or rather to observe me. Next time at the market, I'll try checking out a magic tool shop. I'd really prefer if she stopped examining me from head to toe and settled for a photograph instead. Well, that would be questionable too, but still, it feels better than being stared at directly. Next time we come, I think we'll be bringing a few adventurers along. I've been asked to show them around. Ah, so they're finally coming. Ugh, I hope none of them are scary people. Doesn't seem like Witch-san has anything to worry about. Makes it easy for me to act as a guide. I'm nothing but worried, though. While I was internally letting out small screams at the thought of frightening adventurers arriving, it apparently looked like a composed smile on the outside. I don't have that kind of composure. If rough-looking adventurers were to pick a fight with someone as timid as me, I'd probably just end up crying and screaming. What if I panic and accidentally entangle them with vines or cover their mouths? I'm a harmless Mandragora. I absolutely must not attack humans. By the way, how far can self-defense actually go? As I was thinking that, I sensed a large presence approaching and hurriedly turned my head in that direction. I hadn't done anything wrong. I had only been thinking about the limits of self-defense, but for some reason I felt like I'd been caught doing something bad and almost reflexively wanted to say, "I'm sorry." In other words, I sensed Nikolaus approaching. "Hey, I heard Query-san was here." A little later, Ritter appeared with the purple sprout sitting on his shoulder, followed by Nikolaus. Lately, that spot seemed to be the purple sprout's favorite place. Still, it looked like they weren't here for me, but for Query, which was a relief. "Oh, Ritter-sama, I was just about to come see you." "Ah, I couldn't wait."
Purple Chan's new outfit?
"Ah, right. They did mention ordering something before, so it was clothes for the purple sprout. Query's designs are stylish enough that even a Mandragora like me can appreciate them. I'd seen Ritter discussing various things with her, but I didn't expect it to be a custom order for the purple sprout. As Ritter started talking with Query, Nikolaus, who had been standing behind him, somehow drifted over to me. "Hello, Mage-sama. Oh my court magician-sama, it's been a while." "Yeah, I just came along thinking this might fall under experimentation. By the way, a quick report, the purple one leveled up a bit. Watching him exchange greetings with Eli reminded me Nikolaus was the one who sent the mirror through Eli. Of course they know each other. And it seemed Nikolaus had come to report on the progress of his research into the purple sprout's evolution. Since the purple sprout can't fight, Ritter must be capturing monsters alive and letting it absorb them. That sounds pretty dangerous and difficult. Maybe this is what they call the power of love. So, instead of jewels, he's offering monsters. But honestly, I'd probably prefer that too. I'm not human, so while accessories help me appear more human, they aren't something I actually desire. I can't eat jewels, so they're useless. If anything, I'd rather be given compost. Thinking about it that way, Ritter is definitely raising the purple sprout's affection properly. As the purple sprout was taken into the carriage to try on its finished clothes, I checked its status before it disappeared from view. Race Mandragora, familiar, level 5, vitality D, magic B, skills none, evolution points 2, description. A Mandragora raised on the nutrients of purified flowers. As a familiar, it faithfully follows its master's commands. It has undergone a special evolution allowing it to move freely, but by command, its instant death voice attack is sealed and it cannot harm humans. Its current danger level is low, and it serves as a high-quality medicinal material. Due to its affection for humans, it may evolve into something closer to them and shows no hostility. However, should its master issue a command, it cannot resist and could become a deadly weapon that spreads instant death at any time. Caution is advised. The purple sprout's level had originally been 3. Monsters don't gain evolution points at level 1, but upon reaching level 2 they gain 2 points, and after that they gain 1 point per level. This one was different from the others. I had altered its body shape. Limbs for free movement, a seal to block its voice, and a curvy body. Those used up 3 points. It has clearly grown a bit, so Ritter must be working hard. But wait, the description changed a bit. Why does it make me sound like the root of all evil? I mean, I'm living while helping humans this much. There's no other monster like that, right? It was written as if I were some evil demon king forcing a kind, human-loving monster to fight. What exactly have I done? I feel like this is an unfair description for such a harmless monster. I appraised it, and that purple one is indeed. How is it? A masterpiece, if I do say so myself. It suits her perfectly, doesn't it? Just as Nikolaus was about to say something, the purple sprout returned with Query, drawing everyone's attention. I could hear Eli coughing loudly, probably trying to hide his laughter, a dress that clung tightly to the body, emphasizing its silhouette, with embroidery reminiscent of ethnic wear. It had large slits running from both thighs down to the ankles. In short, it was a cheongsam in a world without China, Coming up with that design really makes Query seem like a genius. And I can't help but wonder what kind of request Ritter made to get that. That's way too sexy. In front of the satisfied Query and the purple sprout striking a pose, Ritter dropped to his knees in bliss. Eli was still coughing, definitely holding back laughter. Witch Sama, is there any medicine you could use on Ritter-san? If you fix that, it'll be a problem for me. Don't bring him back to his senses. I don't think he's coming back from that anyway. I don't understand this world at all. Noel spoke with genuine concern, but Nikolaus immediately cut him off. I also don't think that's something that can be cured. That day, I learned once again just how vast the world of preferences fetishes truly is. Chapter 69. The merchants' wagons, along with a group of adventurers, arrived at the village. Each of them carried weapons, their bodies well-trained and their expressions brimming with confidence. Some bore old scars and visible places, which only made them look even more intimidating. Of course, I nearly let out a scream just from seeing them, but when those adventurers looked at me, they froze for a moment with slackened expressions, then quietly looked away. It didn't seem like they were wary of me at all, nor did they suspect in the slightest that I might be a monster to be hunted. For now that was a relief. This village isn't very large, and if we set up temporary lodgings inside, it could lead to conflicts between the villagers and the adventurers, so we're planning to have them stay stationed outside the village. As I watched the steady stream of wagons and people entering, the village chief, Daon, came over to greet me and began explaining. It was true that the village wasn't very big. Only a handful of adventurers had arrived so far, but more were bound to come. If that many people were added to a village of about 50 residents, disputes would be inevitable. The village already had 10 knights, and the court mage Nikolaus stationed there, and more knights were said to be on the way. It wasn't hard to imagine things exceeding capacity. Though as long as I was here, problems like food shortages wouldn't arise. We're thinking of setting up a campsite between the village entrance and the defensive outpost. Adventurers can each build their own bases as they see fit, and as long as they're inside Witch Sama's bramble barrier, even outside the village, they won't have to worry about monsters. So that means near my house, right? Eek. The brambles I had created didn't just surround the village. They also extended outward, enclosing a wide area that included the vicinity of my home. There was some distance between the village entrance and my house, and if one left the main path, there was a grove full of chestnut and persimmon trees. The location Daon had in mind was probably somewhere around there. Witch Sama, thank you for welcoming this with such a smile. The smile was only because I'd nearly screamed from being scared of the fierce-looking adventurers. It was absolutely not a sign that I was happily accepting this. But for humans, a smile generally means approval. When you're yelling and your face stiffens, it inevitably turns into something that looks like a smile. Maybe that's why humans never realize that I'm actually uncomfortable, unless they could read minds. But if they could, that would lead me straight to a subjugation route. In that case, maybe it's better that they don't understand. As for the location, the area where the court mage set up the teleportation circle would be suitable. Around there, huh? Well, that might be fine. Hey, can I make the campsite myself? Nikolaus's teleportation circle was set roughly halfway between the village and my house. But I didn't want them getting any closer to my home than necessary, so I wanted to clear out part of the grove and establish their campsite myself. Thinking that, I pointed at myself. It seems Witch Sama would like to help create the campsite. If the forest were to be opened up and had grassland created, no one can be as considerate of nature as Witch Sama. I see, then we shall leave it to you. I'll inform the adventurers as well. Truly, Witch Sama, we are always in your debt. I hardly know how to repay you. You don't need to repay me. I just want to live here as a human, and the encroaching demon territory is a problem for me too, so it's only natural I'd help with measures against it. Smiling far more gently than when we first met, so much so that it was hard to believe he'd once had such a sharp gaze, Daon looked at me with trust in his eyes. I smiled back and shook my head. Being able to live here was reward enough for me. This place had finally become somewhere comfortable for me to stay, so the encroaching demon territory was something I needed to eliminate as well. I had no reason to refuse helping the humans who were facing the same problem and letting them do the fighting, though I did still think the adventurers looked a bit scary. At that moment, Noel suddenly looked off toward another direction, so I followed his gaze. A lone woman stood slightly apart from the group of merchants and adventurers. Ah, a beastkin. A cat beastkin, maybe. So women can be adventurers too. It was only natural for Noel to be curious. For me as well, This was the first beeskin I'd seen besides him. But the moment our eyes met, her ears and tail puffed up, and she looked like she might hiss F Shah in warning. That startled me enough to let out a small scream. Please don't make such a scary face all of a sudden. Why is she so wary of me? Could it be that her beeskin instincts are telling her I'm a monster? But Noelle hasn't noticed my true identity at all, right? That person might have something to do with Dawn, huh?
Down?
She's been staring at him the whole time. I felt a bit of hostility, but it didn't quite seem like that either. Noelle tilted his head in confusion while I shrank back in fear at the mysterious hostility. Maybe she held a grudge against Dawn, and that hostility extended toward me for speaking with him so casually. He didn't seem like the type to be hated, but sometimes even goodwill can earn resentment. There might have been some misunderstanding or crossed wires I couldn't tell. Well, I hope whatever it is gets resolved. Until then, I'll just stay away. I had no desire to get caught up in something troublesome. I was just a Mandragora who loved peace and quiet, who only wanted to live calmly. For the sake of that peace, I decided to go ahead and quickly prepare their campsite, though I felt a gaze piercing into my back. I really hoped it was just my imagination. Chapter 70. The place Dayon specified was in the vicinity of the teleportation magic circle Nikolaus had set up. Since he said vicinity, I figured anywhere within sight the sight distance of it would do, so I stepped off the path and into the woods a little closer to the village than the circle itself. Ah, right. If it's directly in front of the teleportation circle, the adventurers would feel uneasy whenever people come and go, and being closer to the village means it's safer since it's farther from the desolate lands too. As expected of Witch-sama. I'm really just trying to create as much distance from myself as possible, but Noelle is interpreting it conveniently, so let's just go with that. Ah, you can't come with me. Wait here, okay? I held out a hand in front of Noelle, who was about to follow me while wagging his tail. I was going to remove the trees now, but if he watched too closely, he might realize something. Sharp as always, Noelle nodded immediately. Understood. It'd be dangerous if a tree fell over after all. The danger I was thinking of was my identity being exposed, not Noelle getting hurt, but if he was satisfied with that explanation, then it's fine. There are a lot of chestnut trees around here, and they're one of autumn's treats. Noelle even makes sweets with them, so clearing them all out would be a waste. I'll regrow them somewhere else later. The sweets Noelle made could be used as gifts for the knights or Nikolaus. Humans appreciated small, thoughtful gestures, and whether there were gifts or not changed their impression of you. Bringing gifts also gave me an excuse to peek at how the knights were doing. So Noelle's sweets and their ingredients were indispensable to me. Since trees are living things, I can absorb them too. Might as well do it while I'm at it. Just cutting them down would be wasteful. First, I approached the nearest tree and reached out to touch it. My clothes were made from vine-like strands that functioned as hair and were still connected to me even now, so I could reshape them easily. If I made a hole in the glove part and touched something directly, I could absorb energy from the tree. And by using my hands, it also looked like I was casting magic. No one would suspect I was actually draining their energy through the hole in the gloves. Normal plants aren't very nutritious, though. Something I'd learned from Nikolaus's explanations is that what I absorbed through my roots was mainly magic power. That was why monsters and plants rich in magic tasted good. Ordinary plants, however, only had the faintest flavor. Like chewing gum that had almost lost its taste already, it went bland almost immediately. The tree I was touching quickly became tasteless too, which was disappointing. By the time the flavor disappeared, the vibrant leaves had lost their color and become a dead tree. It looked a little creepy. Okay, I absorbed it, but how am I supposed to cut it down? There were monsters that swung around blade-like leaves before, but if I used something like that in front of people, they'd probably label me dangerous. Maybe if I just reproduced the blade part with vines and swung it like a whip. As I was thinking about how to fell the trees, I suddenly noticed something strange in my hand. Up until now, it had felt like chewing flavorless gum, but that sensation disappeared too. It felt like I had truly drained everything, and there was nothing left to absorb. So even after the taste vanished, there had still been a little left to absorb, huh? Completely draining, it felt like this. Making a new discovery, I pulled my hand away, and the tree immediately began crumbling from the point I touched it, turning it a fine sand-like dust before collapsing entirely on the spot. What just happened? All that remained afterward was something dry and brittle, like ash or sand. I stood there confused for a while, but apparently if I absorbed too much from a living thing, it collapsed and returned to the soil. I'd never kept touching something after I finished eating it before, so I had no idea. What do I do? If someone sees this, won't they think I'm some kind of monster? Carefully, I turned around to check Noel's expression. As usual, he was staring at me with eyes full of admiration, and before I knew it, the adventurers Doan had brought over were standing behind him too, all staring at me blankly. At the very least, they didn't seem to think I was a monster, which was a relief. I had no idea what kind of look they were giving me, though. Well, this way there won't even be any stumps left, and it'll be easier to make a wide open space. It's kind of time-consuming and annoying, but I'll just do them one by one. And so I continued touching the trees one by one, completely withering and collapsing them. The plan was to build simple huts in the clearing afterward, and let the adventurers live there. And if the buildings were made from my plants, I'd also be able to sense people entering and leaving, which was convenient for various reasons. Yep, this should do for now. I managed to make a space about the size of the village square, so next comes the buildings. First, I'll make a purification flower toilet. As I was building a toilet at the edge of the campsite, a loud shout suddenly rang out behind me, making me jump and turn around. Hey, the beast man should go somewhere else. There's no way we can stand staying in the same place when they stink like that. I don't stink. You're the one reeking of sweat. My nose can tell just fine. What you say? Apparently, trouble had broken out among the adventurers. A female cat beast man and several other adventurers were arguing, the atmosphere tense enough that it looked like swords might be drawn at any moment. Frozen in fear, I watched the situation unfold, and it seemed the adventurers' complaint was simply that they didn't want to live in the same space as a beastman. There didn't appear to be any real reason behind it. Could this be discrimination against beastmen? I'd forgotten because Bit Village had accepted Noel, and the knights never showed any signs of it. But apparently this world really did have prejudice against beastmen. This was probably exactly that. If beastmen, who were still a type of human, were discriminated against this badly, then what would happen to a Mandragora like me? Extermination, I suppose.
Ugh, they're so loud, I want them to quiet down. Right! Their shouting and the insults mixed in with it were so frightening that I decided the best thing was to make everyone quiet down and cool their heads for a moment. I created silent grass, making it sprout around them in a circle. In small amounts, it merely dampened sound, but in large quantities, all sound disappeared entirely, perhaps because I'd panicked and made far too much of it. Suddenly, I couldn't hear a single thing. Silence dominated the area. Confused by the sudden lack of sound, everyone traced the grass growing around their feet and simultaneously turned their gaze toward me. Naturally, being stared at by so many humans terrified me enough that I let out a scream.
Chapter 70.5, Miria Part 1. Back when Miria was still a young girl, her village came under attack by monsters. They were called Komorabihi, creatures that like to kidnap and eat children. The cunning thing about them was their ability to alter the markings on their faces to imitate familiar people and lure humans out. Adults might be cautious, but inexperienced children could easily make mistakes. A few days after one of Miria's friends disappeared, that same friend suddenly peeked out from behind a tree and, worried, Miria ran over. What stood there was not her friend, but a giant, hairy, ape-like monster wearing her friend's face. I wonder if that person who saved me back then is still waiting for me. The steel-like fur of a Komorabihi nullified most physical attacks, so beastmen without magical aptitude had no way to defeat one. The one who slew it was a holy knight, and the one who rescued Miria was the man serving as vice-captain at the time. She had heard humans discriminated against beastmen, yet that man had gently held Miria's hand and spoken reassuring words to her until she stopped trembling and crying from fear. He had been so kind. Miria had promised she would marry him once she grew up, and this year she had finally come of age. He had apparently retired from the Holy Knights and returned to his hometown of Bit Village, and since the village was recruiting adventurers due to the crisis surrounding the demon realm, Miria decided to volunteer. I trained properly so I wouldn't embarrass myself standing beside him, and I built up accomplishments too. I wonder if he'll praise me and say I've grown up well. Her heart swelling with anticipation for their reunion. She registered for the job through the guild that assigned work to adventurers and headed for the gathering place of the members selected for this mission. The new demon realm was the Dragon's Deadlands. It was highly dangerous, but the reward was correspondingly high. Apparently there had been many volunteers, but from among them they selected only skilled individuals with no disciplinary problems. There are a lot of humans who won't let beastmen work, so it's unusual that they care more about problem behavior. Many adventurers were careless and violent roughnecks, but apparently anyone with a history of rough conduct had been excluded, and according to the guild staff, the remaining adventurers were relatively decent people by adventurer standards. For this mission, discipline mattered more than combat strength. Since we'll be working with holy knights too, they probably don't want people who won't follow orders. It is a government request, after all. The one guiding the adventurers to Bit Village was a merchant named Irai, someone familiar with the village from visiting it regularly. When Miria reached the designated meeting place, a very eye-catching carriage caught her attention, and she couldn't help approaching it. A giant four-leaf clover she had never seen before grew from the roof, and countless tiny three-leaf, no four-leaf clovers surrounded it. It looked like a carriage overflowing with absurd amounts of luck. Whoa, it's covered in four-leaf clovers, cute. Indeed it is. The flower witch decorated it for me, you see. A human man peeked out from behind the carriage and smiled warmly at her. Though his clothes appeared simple, they were made from high-quality fabric and impeccably clean. He spoke to her with a smile and not a hint of displeasure despite her being a beast man, so at the very least he didn't seem to be the obvious discriminatory type. "There's a beast man here." The muttered comment from behind her, likely from another adventurer, was far more typical. Even if they didn't openly show it, most humans at least looked slightly displeased around beastmen, which made it all the stranger that Miria hadn't been excluded from this mission. If they valued discipline and cooperation, leaving beastmen out entirely should have made things run more smoothly. "You're Miss Miria, correct?" "Yeah, here. This is my identification. Yes, everything checks out. You're the last member for this mission. Now then, everyone, let me go over the precautions for this assignment." Registered adventurers were issued identification cards, so she handed hers over, but Irai merely glanced at it instead of inspecting it carefully. Either he had a skill that let him instantly tell if it was genuine, or he was very sloppy at his job, since he didn't look incompetent. Perhaps it was the former. In Bit Village resides a person known as the Flower Witch. She is a kind person, so as long as you don't do anything foolish, you won't anger her. But if you see the Mandragoras that serve her walking around, please do not harm them. Huh? Mandragoras walking around? Yes. Though their voices have been disabled, so there's no need to worry. There are many rare plants throughout the village as well, but please refrain from damaging them carelessly. They all belong to the Flower Witch, you see. That person has lost her voice, but her plant-manipulating magic is extraordinary. At the mention of a witch, Miria's ears perked up. Historically, witches were a legendary race that had never discriminated against beastmen and had once driven back the Calamity Dragon. It was said only one survivor remained, serving as a court magician, but recently rumors had spread that another had appeared. And not only that, this one was supposedly the very hero who had confronted the Calamity Dragon. As both an adventurer and a beastman, Miria admired her deeply, and she looked forward to meeting her. She's someone who loves peace and plants and dislikes conflict, so I'd appreciate it if you all refrained from causing trouble among yourselves too. I see that's a warning not to start racial conflicts. The fact he felt the need to warn them at all made it obvious. He fully expected tension between humans and beastmen, which only made it stranger that Miria had been selected for the mission in the first place. After hearing several more explanations, the group finally prepared to depart together in the carriage. Yet for some reason, Miria alone was instructed to ride separately from the adventurers in the four-leaf clover carriage. A lone woman would naturally feel uneasy, after all. It's because I'm a beast man, right? You don't have to sugarcoat it. I know. Well, I can't deny that's part of it. Still, if that's the case, why was I chosen for this mission? Normally, I'd expect to be rejected. I mean, I'm grateful, but even if she'd been excluded from the selection, she'd intended to push her way in and prove she could still be useful on site. But being an official member left a better impression. Still, she couldn't understand why they would deliberately include a beast man likely to become a source of tension. When she asked honestly, Irai smiled with the polished smile of a merchant. "The witch dotes on a beastman boy. You see, that child lost his family and he must feel lonely sometimes. I thought he'd be happy to meet someone of his own kind. Besides you, there weren't any beastman applicants, so I'm grateful you came." So you're just trying to score points with the witch. Ha ha ha. I suppose you could see it that way. Well, I'm personally grateful to that person, so I'd like to repay her kindness whenever I can. So it wasn't that they hadn't excluded beastmen, they had deliberately chosen one. This merchant simply wanted to improve his standing with the witch. Even though everything else about his tone felt carefully crafted, his gratitude toward the witch alone sounded genuine. Just what kind of person is the flower witch? To beastmen, demon folk were figures of admiration. But what if that witch was an incredibly wonderful person? And the man Maria loved had forgotten all about her and become completely captivated by the witch instead. The excitement she'd felt for their reunion turned halfway into anxiety, with those conflicted emotions swirling inside her. Maria arrived at Bit Village, and there she was finally reunited with the person she longed for. Chapter 70.6, Miria Part 2. Welcome to Bit Village. I am Don, the village chief. The one greeting the adventurers was a man with a magnificently trained physique. Even compared to active adventurers, he was clearly powerful at a glance. The moment Miria saw him, her heart leapt. He hasn't changed at all. Even without a knight's armor, dressed only in the clothes of a provincial commoner, his presence was exactly the same. Surely his strength hadn't changed either. Don glanced over the adventurers and paused briefly when his eyes reached Miria, but he immediately shifted his gaze away and began explaining the rules. Perhaps he had noticed her but prioritized work first, and most of what he explained was the same as what Irai had already told them. The fact so much of it concerned the witch only showed how important she was within the village. I want to talk to him already, but work comes first. Separating public and private matters is the basics. They would be staying in the village to defend against the demon realm from now on. There would be plenty of opportunities to talk later. Learning the rules of the job came first. Currently, besides Witch Sama, the court magician is also staying in Bit Village. We should discuss coordination with the knights and the magician after everyone settles in. With this number of people and all the luggage, we won't fit inside the village itself. Yeah, that makes sense. We'll need a campsite. As long as you provide the land, adventurers can live just about anywhere. Indeed. In that case, perfect timing. Please wait a moment. Witch Sama has arrived, so I'll consult with her regarding the campsite. At the mention of the witch, Miria looked toward where Dowan had gone, and the instant she saw her, she caught her breath, because the woman before her was overwhelmingly beautiful. It was as though a fully blooming flower had been trapped in human form, a beauty so extraordinary it felt unreal. Since Miria was also a woman, she merely found herself overwhelmed by the beauty alone, but the male adventurers, unaccustomed to seeing such a woman, could barely even look straight at her after she smiled back at them. She's smiling. Even Dowan, who had just been glaring sharply at the adventurers, softened his expression and smiled in front of the witch. Beautiful beyond belief, a hero who had fought dragons and immensely powerful. No person should be that perfect. Compared to someone like that, a mere beastman would surely fade into insignificance, perhaps not even worthy of entering her sight. Suddenly the flower witch looked over and their eyes met. Miria instinctively bristled and bared hostility toward her. Was it rebellious resentment from realizing instinctively she could never compete, or ugly jealousy? Even after being suddenly threatened, the witch merely smiled awkwardly and let it pass, and seeing even her personality be so perfect only made Miria feel more pathetic. Does Don like the witch? Did he forget about me? A sharp pain stabbed her chest. The way Don looked at Miria carried no warmth of familiarity. It was completely different from the way he looked at the witch. Her hopes deflated completely. Feeling dejected, she quietly followed instructions. But maybe if she talked to him, he'd remember her. Just as she managed to lift her spirits a little, she heard the witch herself would apparently be creating the campsite. Creating a campsite sounds easy when you say it like that, but clearing trees and opening up space should be hard labor. With a body that slender, she's called a witch, so I guess she'll handle it with magic, though it's hard to imagine. Among beastmen, few could use magic, and among humans, magical talent was valuable still. Most people could only use magic tools or simple spells for daily life, and even adventurers generally used only support magic in combat. Powerful magic required talent, and those with such talent usually became holy knights instead of adventurers. The restrictions were stricter, but the pay and reputation were much better. Adventurers were simply people who accepted monster hunting jobs for cheaper pay, making a living from monster materials and such. It was rare for adventurers to witness truly powerful magic. We planned to use this area as the campsite. Led out of the village by Dayon, they stopped before a grove beside a small path. The witch instructed the wolf beastman boy, who seemed to serve her, to wait at the roadside, then stepped into the woods alone, and then she gently stroked the nearest tree, almost tenderly. So it was true that she loved plants. Perhaps cutting down the tree saddened her. Something strange. The tree the witch touched rapidly lost its color. A magnificent chestnut tree, full of moisture and fruit, transformed into a dead tree in the blink of an eye. Miria initially thought withering it first would certainly make cutting it down easier, but the moment the witch let go, the tree crumbled away into dust without even leaving roots behind. Wow, so this is magic. The magic wielded by races gifted in such things was on an entirely different level. Only demon folk could probably turn a tree to ash in an instant like that. And even more astonishing, the witch had lost her voice, meaning she was casting this magic without chanting. Using magic without chants supposedly required an incredibly deep understanding of magical principles. In fact, Miria had thought stories of demon folk capable of that were just legends or exaggerations. As expected, a hero who survived the war against dragons was simply on another level. After looking down at the tree reduced to dust, the witch turned back toward them. She was smiling, yet somehow the smile looked sorrowful and fleeting, perhaps because Miria had heard she loved plants. Indeed, she was gently touching each tree one by one, carefully laying them to rest. She's incredibly strong, but also kind. Even this boy has completely fallen for a witch like her. Dayon probably has too. The eyes of the wolf beastman boy standing nearby sparkled brightly with admiration for the witch. Young Miria had probably once looked at Dayon the same way. The witch has cleared out a pretty huge space for us. All right, let's put up the tents. There aren't even any trunks or roots left, so this'll be easy. Let's work efficiently so we don't make her do more than she already has. The other adventurers began hauling their heavy luggage, and Miria tried to follow suit. But one of the adventurers stepped in front of her and told her to move somewhere else. And because his reason was something as insulting as "you stink," hearing that in a place where the man she loved could hear it made blood rush to her head, even though it was the kind of insult she usually ignored. "I don't stink. You're the one reeking of sweat. My nose can tell just fine." Arguments were bad. She knew that. But she still puffed up her fur and shouted back loudly. Beastmen had sensitive noses, which was exactly why they cared so much about cleanliness. She wanted Dawn to understand this was nothing more than discriminatory slander. As the shouting continued, all sound suddenly vanished from the surroundings. Her ears and tail shot upright in alarm as she shut her mouth and looked around warily. Even the male adventurer in front of her looked confused, so this clearly wasn't his doing, huh? What's this around my feet? At some point, unfamiliar grass had sprouted all around them in huge quantities, and when it came to plants, there was only one possible source. The flower witch following the spreading grass with her eyes, Miria found the beautiful witch standing at the other end. It was obvious at a glance that the witch was responsible. And the witch smiled gently at both Miria and the adventurer. We were warned not to anger her. She was smiling calmly, yet she had forcibly stolen not only their voices but every sound itself, dominating the entire space and making them understand through sheer force. She was definitely angry at their ugly conflict. All strength drained from Miria and her tail curled between her legs instinctively. In the presence of overwhelming power, instinct alone made one want to submit. The ash of the trees drifted through the air at the edge of her vision, and the only sound remaining was the pounding of her own heartbeat inside her body, making the unnatural silence all the more terrifying. So this was a demon folk. This is even scarier than facing a powerful monster head-on. Chapter 71. I only wanted them to quiet down a little because the shouting scared me. It wasn't like I wanted attention, so I immediately withered the silent grass at my feet. The plants causing the silence were gone, so sound should have returned, yet somehow an awkward atmosphere still lingered over the area, and everyone remained frozen, staring at me. Being stared at this much makes it hard to move. Noel, help. When I looked toward Noel, he immediately understood and hurried over to stand in front of me. I felt genuinely relieved and placed a hand on his shoulder. Just having Noel stand before me felt like gaining a very reassuring shield. Witch-sama simply dislikes conflict. Exactly. Loud shouting is scary? Can't everyone just get along peacefully? As expected of Noel, he understands perfectly. Tick! Damn beastman! No, never mind. I nervously looked toward the rough-looking adventurer who clicked his tongue. The moment our eyes met, he quickly looked away and fell silent. Still, I hadn't realized discrimination against beastmen ran this deep. What was I supposed to do about this? Should the female beastman adventurer be given a separate campsite from the others? If I had to make another one, where should I put it? Behind the adventurer stood Down with his arms crossed and a grim expression. When he noticed me looking at him, he nodded and walked toward them. Let us refrain from infighting. The enemy we should be fighting is the threat of monsters, not each other. That's true enough. But whether we can get along with a beast man is another matter. And she's a woman too. We'd prefer she moves somewhere else. Certainly there is some logic in separating the men and women. Lady Witch, may I consult with you on this? Ah, that's true. The problem is where to make it. If it's too close, they'll probably just keep fighting. Still clutching Noel's shoulder, I distanced myself from the frightening group of adventurers and moved away from the square, returning to the forest path to approach Down. Apparently deciding the argument had ended for now, the adventurers began preparing for camp individually, pitching tents in the clearing and unpacking their belongings. They looked very used to it, so perhaps I didn't need to build lodgings for them after all. Even so, later I'd at least make a hut or maybe just a roof for shelter from the rain. Maintaining my image as a kind witch was important. Maybe then they'd try not to scare me and stay quiet. The female cat beastman couldn't bring herself to mingle with the other adventurers. Looking uncomfortable, she stood nearby fiddling with her bangs. There are not many female adventurers. We have no way of knowing whether any women besides her will volunteer for demon realm duty in the future. Then the space doesn't need to be as large as this one. Maybe somewhere closer to the village. When I pointed toward the village, Down made a troubled expression. He looked from the beastman woman to Noelle, then slowly shook his head. Certainly, if it were only one additional woman in the village, there would be no issue. But allowing a beastman to live there would be unfair to Noelle. Thanks to him, the atmosphere of rejecting beastmen has disappeared from the village. Even so, he still lives outside the village. I had meant that I wanted to build a women's campsite closer to the village, but Down apparently interpreted it as suggesting the woman herself could live inside the village. Since Noelle fit in so well, it was fair to say Bit Village itself barely discriminated against beastmen anymore. But apparently the issue was whether it was appropriate to let another beastman live there, while the very person responsible for changing those attitudes, Noelle, still lived outside the village. I don't mind. Living with Witch Sama already makes me more than happy. Honestly, you really are a good kid. I'm almost an adult already, so you don't need to praise me like that. Dayon patted Noelle's head with his large hand. Though Noelle protested with his words, his tail was wagging, so he was probably happy about it. It was likely that age where children tried to act mature and got embarrassed about being treated like kids. I'd hate to make Witch Sama go through the effort of creating another site from scratch, so if things can be managed within the village, perhaps that would be best. However, there are no vacant houses at the moment, so that poses another issue. Recently, it would be fair to say Bit Village was prospering. Many merchants came and went, and the number of goods and animals had increased. Empty houses had either been torn down and turned into farmland or remodeled into sheds for livestock, leaving no unused buildings at all. Still, there was land available, so I figured I could simply make a house like the one I made for Nikolaus in an empty spot. But just as I thought that, the woman quietly raised her hand and joined the conversation. What about your house? You live alone, don't you?
Huh? My house?
It would hardly be proper for a young woman to stay in the home of a strange man. That was such a perfectly reasonable response that even a plant could understand it. And yet the Catwoman looked utterly shocked. Tears welled in her eyes, and then, with her fur bristling and pupils narrowed, she glared fiercely at Dayon. That's awful. You said you'd marry me. But the Catwoman shouted that shocking declaration, then burst into tears and ran off toward the direction of the watermill hut. Startled, I looked toward Down only to find him equally bewildered. Watching him act as village chief made it obvious he was an extremely dependable person, and he certainly didn't seem like the sort of man who fooled around with women or behaved irresponsibly. But at the same time, the woman didn't seem to be lying either. Perhaps it was some tragic misunderstanding. Could she possibly be that girl from back then? Down-san, did you really promise to marry her? No, that was merely something I said to persuade a child to calm down. Still looking troubled, Down explained the situation. Apparently, around 5 years ago, just before retiring from the Knights, he had rescued a beastman village from monsters during his final mission. At the time, a young cat girl from the village had tearfully clung to him, saying, "Marry me when I grow up," and he had tried to calm her down. I am human. We are different races, and I was already 35 years old. There was no way I could seriously accept the dreamy confession of a 9-year-old girl. You said 5 years ago, right? Then that woman earlier is 14? She had been tall and slender with a balanced athletic figure, taller even than me in heels. No matter how anyone looked at her, she appeared to be a fully grown woman. I knew beastmen matured quickly and had shorter lifespans, but this was still astonishing. 14 is adulthood for beastmen. She'd probably already entered her growth phase at 9, so growing that much isn't unusual. Give me another 5 years and I might even end up taller than Dawan-san myself. Even if I know that intellectually my instincts can't keep up. 14 is still a child for humans. Apparently beastmen and humans perceived growth and age very differently. Daeon had only intended it as a way to placate a child. When the girl absolutely refused to give up on marrying him, he'd apparently answered, "If you still truly can't give up after becoming an adult, then I'll seriously think about it." He assumed that after enough years passed, she'd calm down and eventually find someone more appropriate. But she had believed him and interpreted, "I'll think about it as I'll marry you." Then she had grown up and come chasing after him. And because Dawn hadn't recognized her at all, she ended up deeply hurt. This is exactly why people say interracial relationships are a bad idea. I'll go talk to her. If you go, Dawn-san, she probably won't be able to stay calm enough to talk properly. I'm sorry. Once she settles down, I'll speak with her properly myself. Yes, leave it to me. Well, of course, she'd be hurt. Come to think of it, she ran toward the house area, didn't she? I should probably go check on her too. She really did seem hurt, so a kind witch ought to go after her. Though honestly, I was terrified, because she'd glared at me with hostility earlier, so I didn't really want to get too close. But a kind witch wouldn't abandon an upset woman. Still, I was worried, since I'd been talking with Daeon earlier too. Well, not literally talking since I can't speak. Maybe she'd glare at me out of jealousy and shout something like, "You home-wrecking cat," while pouncing at me. No, wait, she's the cat. I'm more of a root. Thinking back on her behavior so far, she seemed rather emotional, which honestly made her scary. Trembling a little, I followed after Noel, hoping he'd talk to her first. He glanced back at me and smiled with a look that seemed to say, "I knew it. I thought so. Witch Sama was worried about her too, right? She's probably feeling pretty down." Yeah. Sorry, it's not just pure concern. I felt a little guilty. Maybe I hadn't been considerate enough toward other people's feelings after all.